The camera remains still. For a moment, there is only darkness. But not the darkness of a bedroom at midnight, something far more ancient, something that was present before you drew your first breath and will remain long after your last. Then, slowly, a sound rises from that silence. It is not quite a voice, not yet. It is closer to the rhythm of your own breathing, though distant, as if it belongs to someone else entirely. You feel it in your chest before your ears register it. That is the first sign that we are not speaking about sleep in the way you usually do, not as a passive state, not as a simple nightly reset for the machinery of your body. What we are about to enter is the version of you that exists when no one is watching, not even yourself. The version that communicates in images rather than words, that interprets the world through metaphor and fear and desire, that constructs entire cathedrals of meaning from nothing more than the residue of a day you have already forgotten. This is where your mind retreats when it believes you are not paying attention. And what it conceals there, in the hidden folds of your own consciousness, may be the most authentic thing about you. You have likely encountered the statistics before. The average human spends roughly 26 years asleep, a figure so vast it becomes abstract until you attempt to grasp it. 26 years of breathing in the dark. 26 years of dreaming, though not all of that time is spent in dreams, and that is where the mystery begins to complicate itself. Because for much of human history, sleep was regarded as a form of miniature death, a nightly rehearsal for the final departure. The ancient Greeks believed that Hypnos, the god of sleep, and Thanatos, the god of death, were twin brothers, and if you study the marble sculptures of their faces, you can see the kinship, the same stillness, the same quiet gravity, the same sense of residing somewhere unreachable. But somewhere along the timeline, we ceased thinking of sleep as a journey and began treating it as routine maintenance. We reduced it to hours tracked on a screen, to sleep cycles and REM stages, to data points on a wristband that informs us we were restless at 3:14 a.m. And in that reduction, we lost something essential. We forgot that when you shut your eyes at night, you are not merely resting. You are departing. And what unfolds during that departure, what your mind constructs, conceals, reveals, and buries again before morning, shapes the person you believe yourself to be when you awaken. Let us begin at the threshold, because the threshold is where the concealment begins. There is a moment just before sleep that neuroscientists call the hypnagogic state, and if you have ever felt your body jolt awake as you were drifting off, or heard a voice speak your name when no one was there, or watched geometric shapes fold into one another behind your closed lids, you have been there. It is a liminal space, a fissure between waking and dreaming, and within that fissure, your mind begins to loosen its hold on the version of reality it maintains throughout the day. The prefrontal cortex, the region of your brain responsible for logic, self-control, and the careful curation of your identity, starts to quiet, and what rises in its place is something far older, far stranger, far less concerned with protecting the narrative you tell yourself about who you are. In that state, your mind begins to hide things from you, not by locking them away, but by presenting them to you in forms you will not recognize when you wake. A childhood memory you have suppressed does not appear as a memory at all, it emerges as a corridor you cannot escape, a door that refuses to open, a figure standing at the foot of your bed whose face remains just out of focus. Your mind conceals the truth by clothing it in metaphor, and you spend the night moving through a gallery of symbols your conscious self would never permit you to confront directly. This is the first layer of what your mind hides when you sleep, the things you have decided you do not wish to know about yourself. Not secrets in the conventional sense, but truths too uncomfortable for the daylight version of you to carry. And the architecture of this concealment is almost impossibly refined. Consider the last nightmare you had that defied explanation. Perhaps you were being pursued through a house that kept rearranging its rooms, or you stood on a stage trying to speak while your voice had evaporated, or you found yourself back in a place you had not thought about in years, a school, a childhood home, a city you left behind, and everything was subtly wrong, the walls angled a few degrees off, the light filtering through windows that should not exist. You woke with your heart racing, and you told yourself it was only a dream, only your brain running random simulations, only the residue of a stressful week. But what if the terror was not random? What if the house with the shifting rooms was the precise shape of your anxiety about losing control, and the stage where you could not speak was the precise shape of your fear that the person you have become is not the person you intended to be, and the childhood home with the distorted light was the precise shape of a wound you believed you had healed but never truly touched? Your mind hides these things in the language of dreams because it knows you will not translate them. It knows you will wake, shake it off, and move through your day without ever asking what that feeling was, what that shape was, what that unspeakable presence at the edge of the dream was attempting to tell you. And yet, even as your mind conceals, it also creates. There is a paradox at the heart of sleep that most people never pause to examine. The same brain that works so diligently to obscure your deepest fears also generates the most vivid, emotionally overwhelming experiences of your life while you are unconscious. Think of the dreams you remember not because they were terrifying, but because they were beautiful in a way that felt almost unbearable. Dreams where you loved someone you had never met, with a depth that made your waking relationships seem shallow by comparison. Dreams where you flew over landscapes that do not exist, yet felt more authentic than the street where you live. Dreams where you grasped something fundamental about the universe, some immense truth that dissolved the instant you opened your eyes, leaving only the echo of having known. In those moments, your mind is hiding something as well, not a fear, but a capacity. It is hiding from you the fact that you are capable of more love, more freedom, more understanding than you permit yourself in waking life. It is showing you a version of yourself that exists without the filters, the compromises, the carefully managed expectations that constitute your daily existence. And it is counting on the fact that you will forget, or that you will dismiss the memory as merely a dream, merely a fantasy, merely something your brain invented because you watched a movie one time. But what if the person you are in your dreams is closer to who you truly are than the person who answers emails and pays bills and says the appropriate things at dinner parties? What if sleep is not hiding the truth from you? What if it is hiding the truth from the version of you that could not bear it? This is where the narrative begins to grow stranger, because we are no longer speaking only of your dreams. We are speaking of something that occurs within the architecture of sleep itself, something researchers are only beginning to comprehend, and it transforms everything about how we understand consciousness. There is a process that takes place during deep sleep, in the non-REM stages, where your brain quite literally cleans itself. Glial cells shrink, creating space, and cerebrospinal fluid flows through in rhythmic pulses, washing away metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. This was discovered only in the past decade, and the images of it are almost mesmerizing, the brain pulsing, clearing, preparing itself for another day of being you. But here is what hides within that process: your brain is not merely cleaning. It is curating. It is determining what you will remember and what you will forget, which experiences from today will become part of your long-term identity and which will dissolve back into the noise of a life that did not quite adhere. And it performs this work without your input, without your consent, based on criteria your conscious mind does not have access to. Every night, you lose the vast majority of what happened to you that day. You forget faces, conversations, moments that felt significant at the time but were somehow deemed unworthy of preservation. You also retain things you never chose to keep: a lyric from a song you barely heard, a feeling you cannot attach to any memory, a fragment of a thought that surfaces months later and feels as though it has always been there. Your mind is hiding from you the architecture of your own identity. It is constructing you, night after night, from materials you never saw it select. And then there is the other hiding place, the one that feels almost impossible to discuss without sounding as though you have wandered into fiction, yet it has been documented across cultures and across centuries, and it refuses to be explained away. There is something that happens in sleep that connects us to one another, or perhaps to something larger than ourselves, and we have named it 100 different things: collective unconscious, shared dreaming, the noosphere, the field. But whatever it is, it suggests that your mind is not as private as you believe it to be. You have had the experience, probably. You have woken in the middle of the night with a sudden, inexplicable certainty that someone you love was in danger, only to discover the next morning that they had been. You have dreamed of a person you had not spoken to in years, and they reached out the following day without knowing why. You have felt the presence of someone who has died, not as a memory, but as a visitation, something that felt more real than a dream, something that left you altered in ways you could not articulate. These experiences are so common across human history that the scientific attempt to dismiss them as coincidence or confirmation bias begins to feel, at a certain point, like a refusal to examine the evidence. What if sleep is the place where the boundaries between you and everyone else become permeable? What if your mind hides from you, during waking hours, the fact that you are not separate? What if the loneliness you feel during the day is partly manufactured by a brain that must filter out the constant hum of connections simply to allow you to function, and what returns in sleep is the truth of your entanglement with everyone you have ever loved, everyone who has ever loved you, everyone who has ever thought of you in a moment of silence? you begin to perceive the scale of it. This is not merely about dreams, or nightmares, or the occasional strange experience you recount over coffee and then forget. This is about the fundamental architecture of your consciousness. Your mind, when you sleep, is doing something that resembles hiding but maybe closer to protecting. It is protecting you from the weight of your own depth, from the immensity of your own emotional capacity, from the terrifying freedom of knowing that you are not the person you pretend to be. It is protecting you from the knowledge that you are still, in some fundamental way, the child who was afraid of the dark, and also the ancient thing that existed before you were born and will exist after you are gone. It is protecting you from the fact that the boundaries you have built between yourself and the world are useful fictions, and that in the spaces between waking and sleeping, those fictions dissolve, and you touch something that has no name in any language you speak when your eyes are open. There is a reason sleep disorders are so often described in the language of haunting. Sleep paralysis, that state where you wake but your body remains locked in the chemistry of REM sleep, has been called the witch riding your chest, the old hag, the shadow on your sternum, for as long as humans have had language to describe it. And it is not merely a cultural artifact, it is a genuine neurological event, the gap between your mind waking and your body remembering how to move, and in that gap, something strange occurs. Your brain, desperate to make sense of the mismatch, projects a figure into the room with you. A presence. A dark shape in the corner, or standing at the foot of the bed, or pressing down on your chest. And here is what your mind hides in that moment: the figure is you. It is the part of yourself you have never allowed yourself to see, the part that exists outside the stories you tell about who you are, and it manifests in the only form your waking mind can accept as an intruder, a threat, something to fear. But what if it is not threatening you? What if it is merely standing there, waiting for you to recognize it? What if the thing you fear most when you sleep is actually the thing you have been running from your whole life, and it is not a monster at all, it is simply the part of yourself you abandoned somewhere along the way, trying to come home? This is the deeper concealment. Not simply forgetting your dreams, not simply the symbolic architecture of nightmares, but the systematic concealment of your own wholeness. Your mind, when you sleep, is performing the work of keeping you functional, keeping you sane, keeping you from being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what it means to be a human consciousness in a body that will one day cease to breathe. And it performs this work with a sophistication no technology has ever matched, with a creativity no artist can replicate, with a devotion you never thank it for because you do not even know it is happening. Every night, you lie down and surrender to a process you do not control, a process that will take the fragmented, filtered, compromised version of yourself you built during the day and rebuild it into something that can survive another round of being alive. And in the morning, you will wake and feel like the same person who went to sleep, but you will not be. You will be slightly different. Slightly remade. Slightly closer to whatever it is you are becoming. And yet, there is a final layer to what your mind hides when you sleep, and it may be the most difficult to confront. Because your mind does not merely hide things from you, it hides things from itself. There are dreams you have had that you will never remember, not because they were ordinary, but because they were too much. Your brain actively suppresses certain dream content, not because it is traumatic in the way we usually understand trauma, but because it contains information that would destabilize the identity you have constructed. There are truths about your life that you have processed in sleep, solutions to problems you did not know you were solving, realizations that would change everything if you could carry them back across the threshold, and your mind has decided, with the cold authority of a system designed for survival, that you are not ready to know them. So it hides them in a place you cannot access, in a language you cannot translate, in a version of yourself that exists only in the dark. And sometimes, in those moments between sleeping and waking, you almost catch a glimpse. A fragment of an image. A feeling that does not match anything in your life. A name that vanishes the moment you try to speak it. And you tell yourself it was nothing. Just a dream. Just your brain running random simulations. But what if it was not? What if, in those fleeting moments, you touched something essential about yourself that you will spend your whole life trying to find again? What if the hiding is not malicious, not protective, not even intentional? What if it is simply the nature of consciousness to be too vast for itself, and sleep is the only place where that vastness can exist without shattering the container that holds it? What if you are not the person you think you are when you are awake, but something larger, something stranger, something that can only fully exist when the lights are off and the world is quiet and the part of you that needs to believe in boundaries finally lets go? The camera begins to move now, slowly, through a space that is not quite a bedroom and not quite a mind. Shapes are forming in the darkness, not quite faces, not quite memories, not quite the future pressing backward into the present. And there is a sound as well, that might be your breath or might be something older, something that was here before you arrived and will be here after you leave. And if you listen closely, if you let the edges of your attention soften, you can almost hear what it is saying. Not in words. In the space between words. In the rhythm of your own heart, which has never stopped since the moment it started, which will keep beating even when you are not there to feel it, which is the only thing you have ever truly owned and the only thing you have never been able to control. The camera lingers on that space between sleeping and waking for a moment longer than feels comfortable, because something is shifting in the darkness, not a shape exactly, but a pressure, the way the air changes before a storm when the sky has not yet decided whether to break. And if you have ever experienced that state, that suspended moment where you are not sure if your eyes are open or closed, where the room around you feels like it might be a room or might be a memory of a room or might be something your mind constructed 5 seconds ago and will dismantle 5 seconds from now, you know that this is where the hiding becomes most acute. Because your mind, in that threshold, is doing something almost impossible to articulate, it is holding two realities at once. It is maintaining the fiction of your waking self while still being immersed in the deeper architecture of your sleeping self, and the friction between those two states generates a kind of heat, a kind of pressure, a kind of almost knowing that slips away the moment you reach for it. This is the place where artists go when they speak of receiving their work from somewhere else, where inventors speak of waking with the solution fully formed, where people who have lost someone speak of feeling them present in the room for a breath, a heartbeat, a moment so brief and so complete that it reshapes the structure of their grief forever. There is a reason so many cultures have developed elaborate rituals around sleep, why the bed has always been more than just furniture, why the act of lying down and closing your eyes has been treated as sacred in traditions that otherwise share nothing in common. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia speak of dreamtime not as a phase of sleep but as a parallel dimension, a foundational layer of reality that exists beneath the surface of the waking world, accessible only when consciousness shifts into a different register. Tibetan Buddhists have spent centuries developing practices of dream yoga, learning to remain aware while asleep, to recognize dreams as dreams while still inside them, to use the dream state as a training ground for the ultimate transition that awaits at death. And what is remarkable about these traditions is that they all point to the same conclusion, arrived at independently across oceans and millennia, that the mind's activity during sleep is not less real than waking consciousness, but more. That the dreams we dismiss as random noise are actually the raw material of existence, unprocessed and uncensored, closer to the truth of things than the carefully curated narrative we call our life. That when your mind hides something from you in sleep, it is not hiding it from the real you, it is hiding it from the temporary you, the provisional you, the you that was assembled for the purpose of navigating a world that requires you to believe in separation, in boundaries, in the solidity of things that are, from a deeper perspective, no more substantial than the dream you had last night and have already forgotten. Consider the way time functions in dreams, because time is where the hiding becomes almost cruel in its elegance. You have had dreams that felt like they lasted hours, days, entire lifetimes, only to wake and find that 15 minutes have passed. You have had dreams that condensed years of experience into a single image, a single feeling, a single moment of recognition that carried the weight of decades. And here is what your mind is hiding in that compression: it is hiding the fact that time is not what you think it is. The linear progression of moments, the past behind you and the future ahead, the slow accumulation of experience you call your life, that is a construction, a useful fiction, a way of organizing information that allows you to function in a world of cause and effect. But in sleep, that construction dissolves. Your mind accesses memories not as recordings of events that happened at a specific point on a linear timeline, but as living presences that exist simultaneously in the field of your awareness. Your past is not behind you when you dream. It is surrounding you, inhabiting you, speaking to you in voices you thought you had forgotten. And your future is there as well, not as prediction but as possibility, as the shape of things that are already forming in the depths of your being but have not yet emerged into the daylight where you can see them. The person you are going to become in 10 years is already present in your dreams, waiting for you to catch up. This is where the science of sleep begins to sound like poetry, or maybe where poetry has always been a kind of science for which we did not yet have the language. Researchers have documented that during REM sleep, the stage where dreaming is most vivid, the brain shows patterns of activity that do not correspond to any waking state. Regions that are normally separate fire together. The usual hierarchies of cognition dissolve. The brain operates in a mode that is simultaneously more chaotic and more integrated than anything it can sustain when you are awake. And what is emerging from this research is a picture of sleep as a state of radical connectivity within your own mind, between memories and emotions that your waking self keeps carefully separated, between different versions of yourself you have compartmentalized in order to survive, between the parts of your identity you are proud of and the parts you have buried so deep you thought they were gone. Your mind, when you sleep, is doing something that looks like chaos but may be closer to integration. It is forcing connections your waking mind would never allow. It is showing you, in the language of dream, that the person you think you are and the person you are afraid you might be and the person you are capable of becoming are not separate entities locked in conflict. They are different expressions of the same underlying field, different notes in the same chord, different facets of a gem you have been holding in your hand your whole life without ever turning it over to see the other sides. And yet, even as we describe this integration, this connectivity, this vast and beautiful architecture of the dreaming mind, we must acknowledge that sleep is also a place of terror. Not the terror of nightmares, which at least have the decency to announce themselves as fear, but something quieter, something that hides within the hiding. There is a phenomenon sleep researchers call sleep state misperception, and it is more common than anyone wishes to admit. It is the experience of lying in bed, convinced that you have not slept at all, that you have been awake for hours, when in fact your brainwaves show clear patterns of sleep, sometimes for most of the night. You have experienced this, probably. Those nights where you would have sworn you never closed your eyes, where you watched the hours pass on the clock, where morning came as a relief and a punishment all at once. And what your mind is hiding in that experience is the fact that sleep is not a binary state, not on or off, not awake or unconscious, but a spectrum, a gradient, a continuous field of awareness that shifts and changes throughout the night. You were sleeping. You were dreaming. But the part of you that needed to believe in control, in agency, in the clear boundary between consciousness and its absence, could not acknowledge that you had surrendered. So it told you a story about sleeplessness, about wakefulness, about the long night you endured, and you believed it, because the alternative was to admit that you are not the one who decides when you are conscious and when you are not, that there are depths of your own mind that operate without your permission, that you are a passenger in the vehicle of your own existence more often than you are willing to accept. This is the deepest hiding place of all, and it is the one most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Your mind, when you sleep, hides from you the fundamental truth that you are not in control. Not of your dreams, not of the memories you will retain, not of the person you will become, not of the fact that one day, you will close your eyes and not open them again, and the transition between sleep and death is so seamless that some cultures do not have separate words for them. Your mind hides this because it must. If you walk through your waking hours fully aware that your consciousness is a fragile construct, that your sense of self is a temporary arrangement of patterns that could dissolve at any moment, that the boundaries you have built between yourself and the world are permeable and provisional, you would not be able to function. You would not be able to hold a conversation, or sign a contract, or fall in love, or make plans for next weekend. So your mind does you the kindness of hiding. It builds the illusion of solidity, of continuity, of a self that persists from moment to moment and day to day. And it maintains that illusion through the night, even as the underlying architecture of your consciousness shifts and reshapes itself in ways that would terrify you if you could see them directly. But here is what happens when you begin to look. When you start to pay attention to what your mind hides when you sleep, when you keep a journal by your bed and write down whatever fragments you can catch before they dissolve, when you learn to rest in that threshold state without reaching for control, without demanding that it make sense, without trying to translate it into the language of your waking life, something shifts. The hiding does not stop, because the hiding is structural, necessary, built into the architecture of consciousness itself. But the relationship changes. You start to recognize that the dreams you remember, the nightmares that wake you with your heart pounding, the strange visitations in the hour before dawn, the sudden clarity that comes in the moment between sleeping and waking, these are not interruptions of your real life. They are your real life. They are the part of your existence that happens when the version of you that answers to a name and carries a history and worries about the future finally steps aside and lets something else breathe. And that something else is not a stranger. It is the you that existed before you learned to be afraid. It is the you that will exist after you let go of everything you think you need. It is the you that is already complete, already whole, already everything it will ever become, waiting for the rest of you to catch up. There are stories from people who have survived near-death experiences that sound, in their telling, exactly like descriptions of the dream state. The tunnel, the light, the sense of leaving the body, the review of a lifetime compressed into a moment, the encounter with something vast and loving and incomprehensible. And what is striking about these accounts is not the differences between them, the cultural details, the religious imagery, the individual variations, but the sameness. The same sense of returning to somewhere you have always been. The same recognition that the boundaries you spent your whole life defending were never real. The same understanding that the mind, when it releases its grip on the fiction of the separate self, opens into something that was there all along, waiting, patient, eternal. And it is not that you have to nearly die to access this. You access it every night, in the spaces between sleeping and waking, in the dreams you forget the moment you open your eyes, in the quiet moments when the noise of your life falls away and something older, something quieter, something that knows more than you know, rises up to meet you. So what is your mind hiding when you sleep? Not a secret. Not a trauma. Not a truth that would destroy you if you knew it. What your mind is hiding is the fact that you are already whole. That the search you have been on your entire life, the search for meaning, for connection, for the person you are supposed to become, it is over. It was over before it began. You are not becoming anything. You are returning to something. And every night, when you close your eyes and let go of the day, you make that return. You touch the place where all the versions of yourself exist simultaneously, where time collapses into an eternal present, where the fears and longings and hopes that seem so urgent in the daylight dissolve into the background hum of existence itself. You touch it, and then you forget, because forgetting is the price of waking, the cost of being a self in a world that requires you to believe in separation. But the touching happens. Every night. Without fail. And the part of you that touches it, the part that knows what it knows and does not need to remember in the morning, that part is not hiding from you. It is waiting for you. It has been waiting your whole life. It will wait until the night you close your eyes and do not open them again, and in that moment, there will be no hiding, no forgetting, no separation between the you that dreamed and the you that was dreamed. There will only be the vast, silent, eternal space from which all dreams arise and into which all dreams return. And maybe, just maybe, that is what you have been feeling in those moments before sleep, when the room goes quiet and your breath slows and the thoughts that seem so important begin to lose their weight. Maybe that is what stands in the corner of your room during sleep paralysis, waiting for you to stop being afraid. Maybe that is what speaks in the voice of someone you have lost, in the dream that leaves you changed, in the feeling you wake with sometimes that you have been somewhere real, somewhere that matters, somewhere that knows your name in a way the waking world never will. Maybe what your mind hides when you sleep is not a mystery to be solved, but a homecoming that happens every night, waiting for you to recognize it, waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to finally lie down in the darkness and let yourself be held by something that has been holding you all along. The camera pulls back now, slowly, from that space that is not quite a bedroom and not quite a mind, and there is a figure in the frame you almost recognize, someone you have seen before, someone who has been with you since the beginning. And the figure is not moving, not speaking, just standing there in the darkness with the patience of something that has all the time in the world, because it does. It has all the time in the world, and it has you, and it has always had you, and it will have you long after the last dream has faded and the last breath has been taken and the last boundary between sleeping and waking has dissolved into the silence from which it came. And in that silence, there is no hiding. There never was. There was only the long, beautiful, impossible dream of being separate, of being alone, of being a self in a world of selves. And when the dream ends, what remains is not nothing. What remains is what was there before the dream began. What remains is what you have been touching every night, reaching toward, almost remembering. What remains is home.